Okay, everyone, good morning. Monday morning's briefing from the Celtic Way, December the 23rd, Ryan. We're very close to Christmas. Are you feeling festive?
In between. I was doing the last of my Christmas shopping last night, so yeah, I'm more in the mood than what I was. But I feel like with this season, it's just been constant. You've had the Champions League, you've had the Premiership, you've had the League Cup as well. I feel like everything's winding down ever so slightly as we get to the festive period, only to then go up again because you're playing on Boxing Day and then you're playing a couple of days later as well. So yeah, it never really stops, but I'm feeling a bit more festive than what I have been over the past sort of week or so. It's hectic out there. I'm glad that I've got everything finished basically, and I can sort of enjoy the festive period.
Went to see the Grinch yesterday. First time I've ever seen that film, and I
I've
think it
never
kind of
seen it.
sums up. I'd say I'd recommend it, but I don't know if I would. I don't know if that's like sacrilege or something like that to be slagging off a film like the Grinch, but that's such a general family favourite. But it wasn't for me. It was the second worst thing I watched yesterday, Ryan. Put it that way. You can probably
Yeah,
guess the
that's
first.
yeah. I can probably guess the first. And I can probably join you in that. And I didn't watch the Grinch yesterday, so I think we've got the same answer for not the greatest thing that we watched yesterday. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it and talk about it.
I also got a bit of sun if people are wondering. Everything is okay with me. I just enjoyed myself a bit too much at the weekend. How are you all? Lovely to have you, Gary and Francis and Helen and Des and Welsh Paul. How are we all feeling after yesterday now that the dust has settled, so to speak? Because I think there's always at full time, there's always frustration in the moment, isn't there? Um, that's natural. It doesn't really matter what's gone before. If you can be in a 100-game winning run, if you don't win that day, you're going to feel frustrated at full time. How are we feeling now that a day or so has passed? Have you calmed down? Was it just a bit of an off day? Is there something we should be concerned about? Please let us know in the comments, and we'll have a good chat about that. Ryan, you had the post match briefing yesterday, didn't you? So what was the story on there? What was the consensus?
Do you know what? I think it was more annoyance than anything, because I know that Celtic didn't play that greatly. That greatly. That's not even a word. I'm making up words in this festive period. That's great. They didn't play that great yesterday, but they still had the chances to win the game, both in the shots that they had on target and the opportunities that came along that were off target, or they didn't even get a shot at goal. I look at the Callum McGregor chance in the first half where he gets pushed, blatantly pushed, and I'm thinking if he takes a shot, he's probably going to score, given
I
his
think he's
form
scoring
this
that.
season.
Genuinely,
Yeah, me too.
genuinely, I think he's scoring that.
Then you've got the chance from Hatate that he drags just wide of the post. And I've got to say, I think he makes the right decision and not passing to Kyogo.
Yeah,
Kyogo's got two men in between him. So it's a difficult pass to sort of get through. Maybe Hatate could have managed it because Hatate's such a good passer of the ball in those tight areas. But then again, he could have gave away the ball as well. So I think he made the right decision there. And then for me, the worst chance is when Kyogo kicks the ground instead of, taking a shot, really. It's a complete mess. It's a great touch from Ida to get Kyogo into that position. Good forward play from the two of them,
yeah.
respectively. And then inexplicably, Kyogo just fails to take a shot and kicks the ground almost. Yeah, I don't know if there's maybe a wider issue with Kyogo in which he's not as consistent or not scoring as many goals as maybe we would like him to. But I think the main thing is when you take Nicholas Kuhn out of this Celtic team, they're not as good going forward, and it's shown. And that maybe is something to address in January. They need somebody else that can get those numbers that Kuhn gets game on game, because it's not just goals that he's scoring; he's also making goals and creating goals by way of assists and getting forward. When you take him out of the team, when you take Johnson out of the team, and you take away the two defensive centre backs that are good playmakers as well, they start a lot of attacks. You see that squad depth just isn't there, and I can't really complain too much with the draw yesterday because they weren't clinical enough in front of goal, but then they were quite good defensively, so they deserved the clean sheet. It's not as if they deserve to get beat or anything. I think a draw is probably the fair result, but it's an annoying result at the same time because they made chances, they just didn't take them.
Yeah, I wasn't massively fussed all afternoon, to be honest, and I don't know if that's that's something. I mean, I felt the minute the team came out, I felt it was going to be a tough match for us.
Yep.
I still
Me too.
obviously thought we could win the game and hoped we would win, certainly. But when the team comes out and, you've got Johnston missing, probably our second best player so far this season. Carter Vickers, Musty missing. Bernardo, who's probably our best player at the moment, form-wise. I know he was available, but obviously didn't start the game. And Kuhn, our player of the season, is the obvious one. Like, you're taking out half your team of starters there, and not just starters, but really important starters. And when you say you're bringing in, with all due respect, Ralston, Scales, Welsh, McCowan, Yang, generally there's a bit of a downgrade. I think that added to the fact that we'd clearly had a pretty bruising final last week. They would have taken a lot out of the team physically, mentally as well. We went up against a really, really stuffy Dundee United team that were incredibly defensive, really defensive. I mean, there was moments in that first half where our two centre-backs, Welsh and Scales, were almost on the edge of the Dundee United box, genuinely trying to prise that open. And in fact, the two best chances we get of the match, not the two best, sorry, but the one that Yang has in the first half where he gets at the right-hand side and the cross is poor, is made by Stephen Welsh, the playmaker Stephen Welsh. And the one you're talking about, the Kyogo one, into Ida, was Stephen Welsh as well. So that summed up how yesterday went. We had so much possession. We clearly didn't do enough with it. But equally, just maybe in another day, that Hatate chance goes in, that McGregor chance, he gets a shot off and it goes in. Kyogo had one as well early on. If one of those goes in early on in the game, like, it's a totally different game. Obviously, the longer it's 0-0, it just becomes more frustrating. But I don't know. I see some of the reaction from people, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I know it's kind of, I've seen, I think, this kind of trend online that just because we've won the last however many games, it doesn't mean that we should overlook one game yesterday. People are only calling it as they see it yesterday. And I get that point of view to an extent. Like, you have to call yesterday's game on its own, and it wasn't good enough. And I know some people look at a bigger trend, maybe since the Leipzig game, and say it hasn't been good enough. I think Celtic are doing fine. I just think yesterday was one of those days. And you get those games every single season we have ever followed Celtic. There has been those days. They happen. There's a bit of a fallout. I remember one against Hibs last season. Do you remember that Easter Road, a 0-0 game? People can probably barely remember that game now. Who started the game? They might remember James Forrest having a chance late on. That's about all. I think Martin Boyle missed a really good chance for Hibs. But I remember the reaction after that game was very similar to this. It was, that was awful, bit concerned. But now, at the end of the season, you don't remember that game. And I'm convinced yesterday will be the same. Now, I get that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't talk about it and be critical of the team. But my own personal view is that I think the team have just built up so much credit this season with the start to the season they've had, that I just think dropping points for the second time in the league this season, 3 days before Christmas, I think it deserves just a little bit of chat and focus on the next game and make sure we win that.
I don't think it needs a big dissection or anything. They have been tremendous this season form-wise, although I'd say maybe in individual games there's been some ups and downs, and there has been a lot more, not negative performances, but not of the standard or not of the level since Leipzig. I would agree with that statement. They haven't been as free-flowing, but that's fine because teams can go up and down.
Are people expecting that Leipzig performance all season? Like, genuinely, and St Johnstone away 6-0, it's never going to happen.
It's unsustainable. It completely is unsustainable. But, I think it's more, I don't think anybody would have been complaining if Celtic had maybe scraped a goal or two. I think the reason is they didn't scrape a goal. Whereas, in the Aberdeen game at home, the other game in which they dropped points, they actually scored first and they scored twice. They were 2-0 up. There was that disappointment, but there was a disappointment because they gave the game away in that manic 10 minutes. Yes, they should have won it, but they'd already had maybe that credit in the bank because they'd scored earlier on in the game. The fact that it was a stalemate and they had so many chances and they just couldn't get it in the back of the net is probably an annoyance for a lot of people. But I do think that they aren't playing as well as they were before. But yeah, I completely agree with you. They've credit in the bank. They won a trophy last Sunday as well. They beat Rangers in the League Cup final. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not a crisis mode. I just think that maybe this result has been in the post for a wee while. You know, you've had games in which it's been close, and then they'll score a late winner, or they'll pull away in the second half. I think with the law of averages, this sort of game has been coming. I think they've been going to drop points for a while. You look at the Aberdeen game; they scored in the last 10 minutes. Worse conditions than yesterday, may I add, but they still managed to get the job done at Pittodrie. So I think that this result has been coming. Unfortunately, you know, they've been getting a couple of draws here and there. You know, drawing against Zagreb. It was a draw in the League Cup, but you win on penalties, which becomes a bit of a lottery. I just hope that for the next game on Boxing Day, you see a bit of a response. Maybe it's a bit of a wake-up call that this team need. We bit of a, you know, once you get those players back, you know, you're missing out on that's 13 million worth of centre backs in Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty, who are not just centre backs, but they're actually deep line playmakers as well. They start a lot of attacks, and if Stephen Welsh is your playmaker, I'm sorry, he's just not as good as those other two in the defence in terms of his passing. Even though I thought he was fine yesterday, I thought Scales was fine too. But having those players at the back that are able to make plays, will help the team a lot. You had Alistair Johnson, you had Nicholas Kuhn. I think you've got contenders, a lot of contenders for player of the season there. So if you take them out of the team, then obviously you're going to see a downgrade. You know, Alex Bailly didn't play yesterday. I thought he maybe could have been a good sub if he came on in the second half.
They only made 4 subs yesterday, so I wonder if there was a bit of illness. I know he mentioned illness, but I wonder if there's more illness than the managers maybe let on. Because like, why would you only make 4 subs yesterday and leave Bailly on the bench?
I thought, for me, the most, not baffling, I think baffling is too strong a word to use, the most eye-opening sub of the time in which the sub came on was Arne Engels after 84 minutes. Now, Celtic were chasing a goal for the full game.
Saying that.
I was saying that yesterday in the post-match, and the more you think about it, the more you're like, well, he actually made a big opportunity when he came on. That shot that he stabbed at the goalkeeper, but he was getting into those positions. I think if you bring someone on, I think Hatate's race was run after about 60, 65 minutes. I know that he's a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to games and really pushing on in the final moments of games, because you've seen that recently. He was Celtic's best player in extra time against Rangers in the League Cup final, but I think his race was run, and Engels should have been on a lot earlier, maybe even in front of Bernardo, because Engels is more of a creative spark than Bernardo. Bernardo will give you that movement and that grit, but I think Engels will open the door because he's a more creative player, and you've seen that before. I just wanted to see more of him yesterday. Maybe he was struck down with illness and he could only play a certain amount. Maybe he was only just making the bench. I'm not sure. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I would have liked to have seen more than 5 minutes. I know there was 6 minutes added time, so he was on the pitch for 10, 11 minutes, but you want to see more from a player like him, especially when you spent a lot of money on him too, and you expect him to come good and show that quality that was needed on the day.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any massive complaints about the subs. I mean, clearly the manager wanted to freshen things up a bit with the starting lineup on top of the enforced changes. I mean, look, McCowan's a perfect example. You've got no issues with McCowan coming in and starting, and I thought he started the game really well. He had a really good flick for, I think, Rio Hatate after a few minutes, and kind of died out of it a little bit, Luke McCowan, but he still looked pretty likely in the first half. As I say, I just think it was one of those days. Going to go through a few comments because there's a wide range of views. Jerry saying poor yesterday, but still 9 points clear. Hard to disagree with that, to be honest, Jerry. I don't think you get much disagreement on either of those points. Certainly the second one, hard to disagree with that. Stephen saying just a bump in the road. Mark, it wasn't like we tried to break their defence and down and couldn't. We were too passive. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's been that's been a bit of a trend in recent matches. Fair to say again, I don't think you get much disagreement that we don't look quite as likely to break teams down. Have you got any ideas why that is? It just feels like we're not quite as slick generally over the past few matches.
I don't know. It's a weird one because I thought that Dundee United played really, really well defensively, and I thought they were rigid and they restricted Celtic to trying to play out wide and trying to. The middle was so congested that it was difficult for players like Hatate, McCowan, Bernardo, Engels. You're listing off all of those talents. They're all central players, and Dundee United deserve a lot of credit for keeping that area nice and congested and not allowing these players to really get on the ball and be on the front foot. It's almost as if they gave up the wings because they knew that the wings didn't have the same quality yesterday. With Yang, they maybe assumed that Yang maybe wasn't up to much, or Daisen Maeda, he can have a good game, but he can also have games in which he's ineffective. He's going to give you that 100% work rate every single time, but he's also got games in which he can be totally ineffectual in a game, and yesterday was probably that, even though he had a couple of chances that I maybe think he could have gambled a bit more at when he got on the end of. There was a couple that went over his head and into that area. He did have that good header in the second half that Jack Walton did well to deal with.
Great
but apart
pass
from that, it was a
Ralston for that one.
He's got that range in his game. We know that he's shown that before in his Celtic career. But it's almost as if Dundee United were like, right, okay, Kuhn's not playing or Forrest's not playing. We can give up those areas because we know that Celtic don't have that same strength. The strength is in the middle, and that's what they did. I don't know if there's a wider issue about Celtic scored 3 goals last week against Rangers, so they've got goals in their game. They scored 3 against Hibs. It was just one of those days at the office in which they couldn't get the all-important goal. 1 would have sufficed, given the lack of attacks that Dundee United had on the day. I'm just putting it down to a bad day at the office in which it was testing conditions. It just didn't work out. They tried their hardest. It's not through a lack of effort, but they couldn't get the ball in the back of the net, unfortunately.
A couple of players that people are obviously picking out are Hyunjin Yang and Lewis Palmer. Yang started the game, didn't get a lot of the ball in his defence, but I think you'd be hoping for a bit more from Yang. And I know people got a bit excited about Yang after the Leipzig game when he came on, and to be fair to me, he did look electric that night. But I made the point, it's very different coming into a game like that, even against that calibre of opposition when they're effectively beaten, I think 3-1 when he came on. Very different doing that as a sub to starting a game like that against a packed defence yesterday. And I just don't see it with Yang. I've never really seen it with Yang. He might still prove me wrong. I don't know. Brendan Rodgers seems to rate him as the 4th winger. And at the moment, he's the 2nd winger because Kuhn and Forrest are out. So Yang's probably going to start on Boxing Day against Motherwell. And obviously Lewis Palmer. And Lewis Palmer at this stage, I don't think you really have to say much else other than it's just a really difficult watch because he's clearly lacking confidence in everything he's trying. Just nothing is coming off, and the fans are getting on his back, and that's making him more nervous, and he can't do the simple things. Like, just thought his sub-performance was really poor yesterday. So clearly people are talking about those two, and for me, we definitely need certainly 1 winger. You could maybe make the argument for 2 wingers to be signed in January. We need to wait and see what the situation is with Nicholas Kuhn. Just for anyone who's not aware, it's he felt his knee twinge in training on Saturday. So Brendan Rodgers says he hopes to find out more today whether he'll be back for Motherwell on Thursday. But I always think when you hear knee injuries, it's always a bit of a concern. So he's going to be a miss, but it's the fact that James Forrest has missed as well. We've kind of avoided real injury issues so far this season. I know we've had some, but I can't remember us having two players in the same position missing and us effectively being down to our 3rd choice, which we are with Yang at the moment. And I think that showed, to be fair. I mean, Yang is just nowhere near the level of James Forrest and Nicholas Kuhn.
The thing with Yang is that he'll show some nice moments with his dribbling, like you said, against Leipzig. But when was his last goal? When was his last assist for Celtic? He's got nothing tangible.
Has he ever scored? I think he's ever scored for us, has he?
I think he scored. I'm actually not sure. I don't know if he got a couple of assists against Aberdeen, but you would have to double check that. I can't think of a Yang goal, which is, quite concerning for a winger. As a winger, you're going to be judged at Celtic not just on your wide play, but your numbers as well. There's no point in Celtic having wingers if they're not contributing goals and assists. Maeda's a bit different because he brings that defensive work when Celtic don't have the ball, but he's also got about 8-9 goals this season as well. So he's doing both. If you're not contributing on the goal side or the assist side, then you're just not contributing for Celtic on the wing at all, and that's his problem. With Palmer yesterday, I agree, he was poor when he came on. I thought he was better than Yang, although that's not saying much given how he performed in the first 60 minutes of the game. I also think it was a bit of an overreaction online on social media when I read it. You'd think that he'd gave away about 2 or 3 penalties with what people were saying about him. I agree. I think he'll go in January, but at the same time, I think that there's very. I think he's. I'm not saying he's the scapegoat. I think that's too strong a word as well. But if Celtic have a poor performance, and it wasn't just Palmer on the pitch that had a poor performance, there was a lot of players, but he seems to be getting the most stick out of anybody, and he only played half an hour of football. He's a guy that is so low on confidence, and it can't help him when he can. It can't help him whatsoever when he does something wrong. He's trying to impact the game. Celtic are chasing a goal. He maybe gives away the ball, and then he hears the groan. There was another player like him just passed, and Mikey Johnson.
Just what I was going to say. Just what the point I was going to make. Who does it remind you of? A winger who clearly has very little confidence as it is, and the support are on his back. And I'm not calling out the support because we've not got it from nowhere. It's been really frustrating watching Lewis Palmer, who's a really hyped player. Our big hyped signing from last summer, and to make it worse, he really started well, and now he's just not a fit for the team at all. So, thankfully, and I mean this genuinely for every party, support, club, team, Palmer, I think he will be leaving in January. I'm not sure about Yang, what's going to happen there. Maybe if we sign a winger, Yang might be allowed to move out on loan, but those two, I don't think it's over the top to say those two just aren't going to cut it for where we're wanting to go. Was there anyone else in your mind, good or bad, from yesterday's game?
I thought Taylor had a decent second half when he was going more inverted and tried to make things happen. But he had a couple of nice passes and crosses into good areas. But it was a game of nothing, really. There was nothing tangible. You had chances. Ida was good when he came on. But then again, Ida comes on. He's an £8 million player. He didn't get a goal or an assist or that. He should have got an assist for Kyogo because that, for me,
was great play.
That's a sitter. It's a great touch from Ida into Kyogo. He should be going away with an assist. Kyogo then inexplicably kicks the ground. Don't understand that at all. Well, it's a mistake, so it can happen. But it's a couple of moments yesterday in which the ball came to Kyogo and he made the wrong decision, or he didn't get enough power on the shot, or he didn't get anything on the shot and it hit his other leg. Remember that one that he scuffed, completely missed it. A couple of seasons ago, those are the chances that Kyogo would be snapping up. The other chances that he was scoring them against. I remember against Dundee at Dens Park in Ange Postecoglou's first season, the pass into Kyogo, and then he hits it. And there was also a great goal against Dundee United at Tannadice from just outside the box too. Those chances aren't really happening as much. Out with the one against Rangers, of course, but you expect him to turn up in those games. But I just want to see him do a bit more, and not the lesser games, but these games in which you're chasing a goal, you're looking for your main man to really pull you out of a bit of a hole at nothing each, and he didn't do it yesterday, unfortunately, for the team. I just expect more. There's so much quality up front. You spent a lot of money on those two players, and if they're not getting goals, then it's quite disappointing. When you expect a lot, when you rely on goals from the wings, and the wings are decimated through injury, through Forrest, through Kuhn, you need your players like Kyogo and Ida to step up. And it's unfortunate for Ida because, maybe in hindsight, you look back and you think maybe he should have started the game. But for Kyogo, he really does need to get going again because, the goal return that he's got at the moment just isn't good enough for a player that we know is so much better than this. And for whatever reason, he's not scoring as many goals. I know he turns up in the big moments, but you would expect him to have more at this stage of the season, especially in the league.
I mean, I think there's maybe an argument this season, the way we're playing under the manager, that Kyogo's role is maybe less about the goals and it's more about what he's supplying for the team, and clearly that's shown by the amount of different players all around the pitch who we have scoring goals. But I do agree. I mean, I said it last week, so this isn't based off of Sunday, but I don't think Kyogo's playing well at the moment. I don't think that's controversial to say. Adam Ida would start for me on Thursday. I'm pretty sure Adam Ida will start. And I think that position's up for grabs right now. I mean, you could argue every position's always up for grabs, but I really think with Ibrox coming, Adam Ida has an opportunity to force himself into that team, and I hope it's one that he takes, because if he takes it, it means that he's done something pretty special. I think he starts against Motherwell, and hopefully, as I say, puts in a great display, and then keeps the jersey for Ibrox or St Johnstone or whatever. I think he does look pretty good coming on the last few games, to be honest. I think he looks a threat. His layoff for Kyogo yesterday was really good. I think Kyogo's always missed chances. Think back, you mentioned that Dundee game, the game he broke through. I remember him scoring a hat-trick that day and missing 3 sitters as well, like 3 absolute sitters. Go back and watch the highlights. He could have had 6 that day. So I think he's always missed chances. Maybe he's not getting quite as many at the moment, but I'm certainly not writing Kyogo off. He's going to be all right. I think he's just going through a wee run. He had a similar run last season at one point. So that's where I am on everything. Frustrating yesterday, sure, but I'm prepared just to move on. And a couple of big games now to go to finish off the calendar year, Ryan. A couple of wins would be nice, a couple of home games, and then we go into the derby. And really important, I think, we win our next 2 games. Bare minimum, no more drop points, because then you go to Ibrox 9 points clear, worst case scenario. And I think we were in a pretty identical situation a couple of years ago there when we got the late goal with Kyogo scoring, of course. So I'm still feeling good about things, and looking ahead to Motherwell now, which will be a tough game in Boxing Day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think worst case scenario, it's 9 points. You've got to get those 2 wins against Motherwell and St Johnstone, respectively. I don't think Rangers will win both of their games. I think they'll drop points in at least one of them. They're just that sort of team. I know they're in pretty good form at the moment, but I know they had other chances, but they only beat Dundee 1-0 at Ibrox. They're not a team firing on all cylinders, and I think away from home especially, they look vulnerable. So I think that Celtic will regain at least an 11-point gap by the time that the 2 sides face at Ibrox. That's just my sort of shoot prediction, but at the same time, I can just see that happening. They're just one of those teams that they've always got a drop points performance in them. I think with Celtic, it's so rare that they'll drop points, and I think in these next 2 games, because it's got to be the case that Celtic show up more in these next 2 games, because they've got to go ahead of steam ahead of the Glasgow derby at Ibrox. That's a game of itself. It's a complete event of itself, and they need to get back on good form. I'm just hoping that players like Nicholas Kuhn, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Austin Trusty, they'll all be fine for that. Hopefully they're fine before that, and they can play a couple of games and really get not back used to the ground, but back in the swing of things after missing that game the other day. It shows that Celtic really missed Nicholas Kuhn when he wasn't playing, and I think that's testament to him and how well he's done this season. This time last year he was at Rapid Vienna. He wasn't even at Celtic. He then had that difficult period, but he's been absolutely tremendous this season, and that's all down to him. But the fact that Celtic are sort of reliant on him to make goals and score goals shows how good he's been for the club. So looking forward to having him back, and hopefully his knee issue isn't too serious and he can come back as quick as possible. I just think that it was a blip yesterday. They could have scored. They should have scored probably with the chances created, but they didn't. They dropped points. Dundee United were probably deserving of their point in the end, given the way that they defended their box. I don't think they did enough to win the game. They didn't have any chances really of note that tested Kasper Schmeichel, apart from a couple of corners at the end that maybe could have caused more trouble. But I think all the trouble was going at the opposite end with the way the wind was going in the second half. It's a blip. I'd like to see some changes on Boxing Day. I'd like to see Arne Engels back in the team. I'd like to see Paulo Bernardo in that team. Maybe there's you're not going to drop your captain, but I'd like to see different formations in that midfield to see if maybe something better would fit. You're not going to drop Cal McGregor. I'm not advocating for him to be dropped, but I just want to see the likes of Arne Engels and Paulo Bernardo start more games and really show that quality that we know that they've got. They're young players, yes, but they've got that quality. It's just all about consistency. Let's just hope Boxing Day's a bit better than yesterday.
Yeah, team news wise, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Austin Trusty were ill for yesterday. So manager didn't actually say anything in that, but you'd obviously think if it's illness, hopefully by Thursday they'd be all right to go. Alistair Johnson should be back. Just wanted to give him a bit more recovery time. Obviously, he had his hip injury from Zagreb, played in the cup final, rested yesterday. And obviously, as I said, Nicholas Kuhn's probably going to be missing. I think that's going to be an interesting one to find out what the story is with Kuhn. It's one of those that like you could be anything, to be honest.
You know what's going to happen with the wing position, especially with news that's coming out recently in France about Rennes with Jota wanting to leave. Rennes already 6 months in. You know what's going to happen. My question to you, Hamish, and I know that you're the host, but would you go back and get Jota, or do you think that that's already moved on? That's I know Brendan Rodgers never worked with him because he went away to Saudi, like effectively when Brendan Rodgers arrived for pre-season. Do you think that's an avenue that Celtic could go down next month? I'm in two minds about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the story is with the deal, how much we'd have to pay, etc. Not really been following Jota, but 100%. If the question is, would you take Jota back? Yeah, definitely. He was a hell of a player.
Would you take Jota over Palma and Yang? Of course you would, because he's got that track record of being really.
Imagine
really good
Jota on one side, Kuhn on the other. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing to Daizen Maeda, who I probably love more than any current player, but this is what you want. You want options. So I don't think it's going to happen. I would kind of think probably that Jota would want to keep playing in a top 5 league, but who knows? We'll wait, and it's something we'll continue to keep an eye on along with the Kieran Tierney stuff. Okay, happy to head, Ryan. If you are, we'll catch up with you later on in the week. I think John's going to join me tomorrow, so we can chat about what's happening at that stage. Thanks everyone for tuning in. A reminder that if you want to support the channel and get notified whenever we go live, you can click subscribe. Takes 2 seconds out of your day. It's completely free and helps us to grow the channel and reach more Celtic fans. Okay, everyone, thanks for watching. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.